Yeah.
And then you gave all the opinions of Ibn Taymiyyah and Dhahir.
Yeah.
The Hanaf. So are you meaning that you had wudu, made mash al-khuf, you broke your wudu? No. You had wudu, broke your wudu, mash al-khuf. Now you removed it after you made mash.
In both conditions, in both situations. In both situations. يعني مثلا أنا كنت متوضئ.
No.
And I didn't break my wudu.
No.
I didn't do any mass or anything. Okay. Or this is هذه حال. حال ثانية. I broke my wudu and I did mass.
No.
Right. Either of these situations, I have to wash my feet. عند الحنابلة لا لابد تجدد الوضوء.
The first scenario نعم أنا.
Yeah.
ولكن.
Yeah. مش معقول. That's what I'm saying. Like all of the الله هدي ابن تيمية يا أخي معقول مرة يا أخي. I have problems with it.
السؤال الثاني.
تفضل.
في يعني العاصي بالسفر والعاصي في السفر.
Okay.
So do I have that رخصة؟ إذا أنا مثلا أنا عاصي بالسفر.
Okay.
Do I have the رخصة في مسح الوضوء؟
No, I mean the rukhsah is always there. Are you talking about the mudda?
No. أنا مثلا I'm عاصي بالسفر. I'm going to Las Vegas to party to do all this.
يعني أي صح.
So there's في in the Shafi'iyya.
Yeah.
There's
No, but it works.
No.
Okay.
What you're gonna do? Just put the chain around the door, and I'll come back later.
Okay. What did you guys change a lot?
They know. I think this one is not the original key.
No,
it's not the original master key.
But this way, it's like just there.
So you need to have the original key.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they said they put the same lot. I mean, the same key. But I think there is something wrong with it. Not just yours.
Oh, all of them.
Yeah, most of the keys. Because my key is not working on that one too. Stacy's key is not working, and another person is not working. So it means he did something wrong on the
Yeah,
lot.
he did.
The gate key doesn't work. It's not working.
The gate key.
The gate key.
You changed the lock.
They changed the lock and they said they put the same master key. Yeah, can you check? Can you come and check yours?
Yeah.
With me?
Okay, I put the quiz in the WhatsApp group, so you guys can take a look at it, inshallah. All right.
Are we ready to go live?
You can go ahead and go live, but the thing is, they're taking a quiz right now, so I'm not really sure.
Whatever's on your screen, I got the second camera to work. So
okay. Hello. There we go.
This is my
Oh, the chart. The good thing we went over this.
Yes, we did. What, you think I give you quizzes on stuff we didn't go over? Life's like.
I love that.
I know, right? MashaAllah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, so what's going on? Questions?
vote for that one.
Oh,
It doesn't matter. It doesn't, yeah, this is just, it's a general statement.
I think,
Yeah.
I'll keep this to myself.
I mean, the thing is, I have the answers come up, right? And I have
Oh, yeah.
I have an answer key if you have any incorrect answers.
Right.
After you submit it, you should see it.
Yeah, no, I see.
The clarifications are there, and the clarifications are good.
Yeah, I'll just keep this to myself.
Yeah. So today, inshallah, we're going to be talking about chapter 8. Khalas, so
No, I'm خلاص.
Okay. So did you understand now the answer?
I just say false, but I got it.
Right, so today, inshallah, we're going to be talking again, and this is Ghazāli's discussion of how to break down knowledge and how to deal with it and the presentation of it. So he talks about knowledge being two parts. And what did we say the two parts of knowledge were? I'm sorry? Yeah.
Intuitive and intellectual.
Oh, even more basic than that. Step up.
What's that?
Intellectual and religious. Right. These are the two. And he just expresses this in a different way in this chapter. One is through jihad, one's through mental activity. The other one is through inspiration, right? And we said that there are types of inspiration, and the mental activity is for who? Who are the people who have reached in that level where they do a lot of intellectual activity and a lot of research and work? What group of people is that? Okay, the scholars, right? In general, there's the ulama, the scholars. And for inspiration, we have two groups of people. Who does he mention?
The wali
Okay, the wali
and the anbiya.
and the anbiya, the prophets, right? So these are the two groups of people. What is the difference in the inspiration that they receive?
Revelation and
Ahsan.
inspiration.
And right, revelation or he mentions it again in a different way here. So he says specific and general. So when he means specific and what he means by general, what do you guys think? What does specific mean? When we think about the difference between the awliya and the anbiya, the awliya, the walis and the prophets, what is it that comes to mind? What is a different type of revelation that comes to them?
The specific is going to be actually a legislation that will require and follow.
Very good. Right. So over here, when we talk about specific, this is actually legislative, right? So this is going to be anything that is legislated, that we are told to do something in a specific way at a specific time or in a specific place. General, this is just general, right? There's no tashri'ah, there's no legislation that actually happens with the way. No. So here he talks about the heart is, remember we talked about the heart being a mirror? And we said that the heart, what it reflects is knowledge, and what it actually retains is the knowledgeable, meaning that which can be known. And sometimes perception can reflect reality perfectly, and sometimes it can't. And we talked about the different reasons for that. We talked about 5. You guys remember what they were? What prevents the heart from seeing reality?
And the youth.
Youth was one. Good.
Right?
Busy. Busy.
Oh, good. Ahsant. Ghafla.
Is it arrogance?
Arrogance
Myself?
might be under sins.
Okay.
Right.
Lastly, and then there is
Prejudice. Right.
Was it what you come to know as
Youthfulness or
right or
something.
something?
Right. Youth he mentioned. Right.
Yeah.
So what was the last one?
See, I remember by the mirrors, it's like you're not looking at the mirror.
Uh-huh.
The mirror is foggy.
Ahsant. Good.
Your perception is,
Oh, good.
and something about what you know.
So one in ignorance,
Ignorance.
right? Of not knowing the direction of where to look. So these were the 5. In this chapter, Ghazāli, he focuses on one. Which one do you think that is, and why do you think that is?
ignorance.
Not ignorance. He focuses on the veil. He focuses on prejudices. Why do you think that is out of these 5? So youth, sin, right? Being busy and ignorance. He doesn't spend time on these, but he spends time on prejudices. Why?
Because the lens in which you're looking at the prejudice you think is right.
Okay. I mean, you're getting very close. But the reality is, this is the most difficult one to remove. All of the other 4, they're very easy to recognize, right? Youth is easy to recognize. Sins are easy to recognize. I'm busy, what do I have to do? I just have to turn back. And if I'm ignorant, what do I need to do? Learn. What is the problem with prejudices? You have it.
You think they're right?
You don't recognize it. Like the lens that you're looking through, you don't even realize that you're looking through that lens. And that's part of the problem that Ghazāli mentions it. And he says that there are 2 ways to remove this veil. There are 2 ways to remove these prejudices. What do you guys think they are? And it's based on, again, the nice thing about Ghazāli is how he builds up arguments, right? He builds up arguments and he builds up talking points. And he mentions these previously too, by the way. So what are 2 ways that I can remove this veil?
Challenging.
How?
Ignorance.
Okay. How?
Actually go and learn from the
I said I can learn, right? I can self-initiate. I can actually take steps to try and remove that. And what is the second way that prejudices are removed?
Experience.
حلو.
Remembrance.
Just no. Well,
Reflection.
just from Allah,
From Allah, okay.
right? Just one day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can make you realize that you had this veil and that you had this prejudice without any initiation. I didn't do any work for this, right? Or I could do work from it, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for whatever, out of his wisdom, his infinite wisdom, he decided that he was going to remove that veil from me and remove it from my eyes. So he talks about inspired knowledge, right? He talks about inspired knowledge. And he says, how does an individual, or who are the people who receive this inspired knowledge? The awliya. So what are some characteristics of the awliya? And he talks about them. He says, number one, to cut off all earthly ties. And he explains this: family, possessions, children, etc. Withdraw into privacy. What does that mean?
Seclusion.
Right, seclude yourself. What's interesting here is his mention, he starts with this. He starts with this. He's saying the first way to withdraw into the seclusion, first you have to be what? You have to be fulfilling your obligations. You have to fulfill your obligations, and you have to make sure that you're doing your supererogatory acts. You're doing those extra acts. And this doesn't mean, he gives specific examples of this. He says that it doesn't mean to focus on these things. What does that mean? What is he saying here? He's saying that these are not this. How and why? Like how? What does that mean? Like focusing on recitation. What does that mean?
Recitation of
the Quran. He's talking about Quran. I'm sorry. I'll put that in. Yeah.
Someone says, I assume these things aren't permanent, right? Like you're not supposed to permanently cut off earthly ties.
We'll talk about what it means. I'll come back to it.
So I think not focusing, because these things are the ones which give you the veil itself, rather than the recitation of the Quran.
Okay. No. So all right. Let's talk a little bit about this. I think you're getting on the right track. So focusing on recitation, it could mean a number of things, right? It could mean just focusing on how to recite, right? How to recite itself. And he's saying that this is not khalwa. Yes. Why? And he says exposition, tafsir. Doing tafsir is not khalwa. And just reading in and of itself is not khalwa. I found this extremely interesting that Ghazāli would say this. Look at all of these. Number one, they deal with the Quran. All of these deal with the Quran. But look at the relationship he's trying to make us have with the Quran, that he would actually qualify as khalwa, that he would actually qualify as withdrawing into privacy. What is not listed here? He's not listing pondering here, because pondering is part of this. That is part of withdrawing. Because what is pondering? Pondering is actually engaging with the Quran. It's actually engaging with the Quran. And what is it that Allah is saying to me? Right? And that personal engagement is exactly what tadabbur is. And it is not focusing on tajweed rules. It is not trying to explain the verses, right? This is the difference between pondering and explanation. He's saying, don't try to explain the verses. This is a intellectual act. For some scholars, can it be a type of tadabbur? Yes, I think it is. I really do. And I think that's not the type that Ghazāli is talking about. He's talking about just for the general lay Muslim. And lastly, just reading. Because what are some of the reasons that we read Quran?
Maybe your daily awrad.
Yeah, it was for blessing, right? For barakah, right? We read it just for barakah, just for blessing. And it's not even somebody who's a native Arabic speaker or somebody who speaks Arabic, it's not necessary he understands every single word. It's not. And sometimes the construction of the words in the Quran, it doesn't give a very clear image of what it is that is trying to be portrayed in the verse. So, like I said, I thought this was very poignant of Ghazāli to actually point these things out and to say that these do not qualify as withdrawing and doing and spending time with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because essentially that's what khalwa is. To be alone with Allah. How can that be done for the obligatory prayers or Hajj? which are two communal acts, yes or no? How can I be alone with Allah in those acts?
Not focus with people around you. Be understood.
Right? Yeah, to be there as if you are you pray as you're the only one there praying. It's extremely important. I mean, wallahi, these really beautiful examples that he's bringing. Seeking Allah's vision. What does that mean?
Seeking His pleasure.
Seeking His pleasure and wanting to see Him on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Wanting to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So if I want to meet Allah, what am I going to do?
Do good deeds.
Everything possible to make Him happy, which is essentially what a good deed is. I'm going to do everything in my power to make Him happy. Why? Because I want to meet Him. I already know you have a question, but I'm not going into it.
I'm not gonna ask that question.
So over here, I already know. Is رؤية الله ثابتة? No. Is it بالبصر وبالقلب? No, man, I'm not answering that. But anyway, here,
No.
when does he mean to do this? Because obviously, he himself, does he explain verses? Yes, he does, right? There are places where he explains them. He even has a word where he reads Quran, right? This is Ghazāli himself. He did these things. Did he have a family? Did he have possessions?
Yes.
He had all of these things. And this goes.
Or Adkar.
I'm sorry.
Adkar or where?
They're the same thing. Yeah. So and we'll talk about Quran. So Ghazāli himself did all of these things. So what is he talking about? That a person needs to cut off his ties. What is he talking about that a person shouldn't read just for the sake of reading? What does he mean?
You should have a purpose when
Hmm.
when doing these things.
When you do these things, ahsan.
We'll say Allah.
When you're doing these,
Yeah,
when
that
you're
makes
doing
sense.
these worships, at that time, and this answers Osama's question. What at that time this should be the mentality that you have. This should be the mental state that you're in. This should be the state of your heart. Because there are times where you don't. Hadith Abu Bakr, very famous hadith. He said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Ya Rasulullah, when I'm with you, I feel close to Allah and I remember Him and I want to do good deeds. He said, but when I go back to my family, I forget all of those things. And how did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam respond to him?
Angels.
Yeah.
He smiled.
Yeah.
He smiled and he said, if you were with your family like you were with me, the angels would descend and they would walk the streets holding your hand, like trying to be like you and out of honor and things. Saying that well, it's not something that's realistic. You have you have a time for this and you have a time for that. So here he mentions something very specific, and this is a point of contention that I do want to spend some time and I want to talk about. Repeating Allah's name. He says it very categorically. Repeating Allah's name alone. He's not saying say Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. No. He says very categorically, very specifically, repeating Allah's name by itself. Like, is that an issue? That's something we're going to talk about. To the point where he says until he loses himself. He very categorically, he says it very clearly.
For now.
Like that. He said until he loses himself and his heart becomes one with the meaning. It is. Well, it's doing it. It's really nice. For now, is basically losing yourself.
Lose yourself in the moment.
In the moment.
You gotta never let it go.
But you don't have just one shot.
Allah.
So I get, and the thing is, think about all these things again in context. It's very important to think about these things in context. When is he saying to do this? When you are in a state of worship. That's it. He's not saying that you can be like this all the time. Even again, right? Yeah, Allah understand. Yeah, no, the levels of the Sufis have always been very intriguing. But yeah, that's the bottom. So over here, he says until he loses, he becomes one with the meaning. Like, how can we digest that? And what does that mean? What is he talking about?
You internalize that.
Right? You're internalizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who He is and His blessing and what He's done.
And this is beyond khushu.
I know this is a type of khushu'. This is, I mean, so you're talking about things like khushu' and taqwa, right? All of these things are an embodiment of that. Up until this point, like even this, talking about this, and we'll talk about it more, inshallah. I want to talk about dhikr. What is it that's intended here? Why is it that this type of dhikr is even allowed? Because there are a number of schools that say, okay, just repeating one of Allah's names is not reasonable. You can't do that. This is not permissible. This is not a type of dhikr. This is not a type of a remembrance that the Prophet ﷺ did. So how do we deal with that? How do we talk about that? What is there? There has to be more to that. And how is it, and why is it that Ghazāli, for someone who we've predicated, and we've already talked about up until this point, what does he talk about? He's talked about the importance of the Sharia. He's talked about the importance of seeking knowledge. He's predicated all these things. He's already set the guidelines, like, listen, if you want to become a master, you need to have knowledge of the Shah. He says that. We've discussed this. So how can it be someone like this that would allow something that is impermissible or something that would be an innovation? And again, we'll get to it very soon, inshallah. But this concept here, this idea of taqwa, this idea of ihsan, this idea of khushu', this doesn't go against anything that comes in the Quran and the Sunnah. When the Prophet ﷺ, he talks about, and we'll mention a few hadith that have to deal with this. But I think it's very important here just to sidetrack a little bit on dhikr and the types of adhkar. The first one, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? Ala bi dhikrillah tatma'innul qulub. That truly it is in the remembrance of Allah that hearts find peace. And he says, right? No, and it's a very appropriate, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says dhikr very clearly. Right? And dhikr is remembrance. So there are types of dhikr. Right? There are types of dhikr. One is of the tongue alone, like what? Even the salawat, you're absolutely right, right? The prayer, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, recitation of the Quran, right? All of these are adhkar that we know and that we're aware of. Like of the heart, like what?
Silently saying Allah.
Right, silently in our hearts, right? Without verbalizing, without saying anything, just thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Or loving the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? This is an act of the heart, and all of those things are rewarded, right? These are different types of remembrance. These are different types of adhkar. And lastly, of the heart and the tongue. What is this?
Both. I'm engaging in the tongue, but
So and how does Ghazāli propose this is done?
In private?
Not just private, but by repeating Allah's name. Because the reality is, it's a combination of the two. By saying Allah's name, what am I doing?
sinking in.
And what am I sinking in though? This is important.
The fact that He is here,
Ahsant.
like Allah is
Right,
Allah.
the greatness of Allah, the magnitude, the power, the ability, His bestowing of mercy upon me. By saying Allah, that's not the goal. You know, right? Even He mentions Himself, right? He says that you're it's not really the wording that He cares for. The reason you repeat it is because you want to do what?
The meaning.
You want the meaning to be embedded in your heart. So saying things like Ya Latif, right? Or Ya Rahman, right? The idea is that those are certain characteristics that you want to actually ponder over and bring to your heart. How? Yes. But yes. So all of those are different. These are just different ways. And why are you okay? Here, let me ask this question. Why is this creativity allowed in dhikr versus other types of worship?
More personal.
It's personal, absolutely. I agree with you. Is that a reason though that it should be allowed?
Repeat the question again, sir.
Why is there this type of creativity in dhikr? Why is it allowed versus in other types of ibadah?
It's individual.
It's so very similar to what Ibrahim said.
Is it like, okay, so against Allah, the idea is like you're in direct communication with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Okay.
So there's like a formula, there's an adab to like
Yes.
to it. Whereas dhikr is like, it's more fikr, like you're thinking, you're not necessarily in.
You're not active. You're not in
Direct.
active communication.
Yeah.
Okay. Jade. What else? Did the Prophet ﷺ prescribe to us on how adhkar or how dhikr should be made? Some. Were those meant to be exclusive, or exemplary.
Example.
Right? Those are examples.
Mm.
When the Prophet ﷺ, and are those the best adhkar? Yeah, obviously. So, these are prophetic adhkar. These are prophetic remembrances.
Mm.
But does it prevent an individual from taking those and modifying them or changing them or adding on to them? Is there a limit in the creativity I can have with my dhikr? No, there's not. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ never put one. He never said, don't make dhikr like this. Right? There's no limitation that's there. And having that creativity, there are two major things that are essential parts of our deen that the Prophet ﷺ has really left open-ended for us. Dhikr and dua. Ahsant. Why? Because like you guys said, these are they're personal expressions. They're my personal expression to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why there's creativity that's allowed in these things. And again, if the purpose is to focus on the meaning, taking Allah's name, or even using the dhamir, even using huwa, right, which is again very common within a lot of Sufi circles. While some of us might think it's strange, which is fine. I mean, how creative somebody is, I have a right of creative freedom in critiquing him. Yes or no? Right? I have a creative freedom in critiquing him. But why is he saying it? He's doing it because there are certain characteristics from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is represented, and he feels he can get closer to his majesty and internalize the meaning of his majesty by repeating that. So it's very important, again, to understand that it's a creative process.
Does Ghazāli talk about the difference between the names of Allah in that they impact, do they impact one? It's one thing to think about it,
yes.
But actually repeating it and the process of that internalization, if you're doing it correctly, the effect that one name might have over another. I've heard things be careful about saying this name too many times because it's one of Allah's stronger
names. Yeah, and it might overwhelm. It might overwhelm you and things like. And the thing is that possible? Yeah, but these are just general warnings. I mean, if I don't have a signpost from the Prophet ﷺ that actually specifically prohibits me from doing that, there's nothing wrong with it. But again, a lot of these awrad, repeating names X number of times, saying certain type of dhikr, things like that, where did these come from? Right, it came from people who like Sufi masters who were part of this creative thought, right? It was their creativity that allowed them to come up with these systems, right? And then they said, hey, this worked for me, and I'm going to pass it down to you. And this is where they get their silsila, right? This is where they get their chain from. So in that creative thought, they said, okay, and again, a lot of it, it's very parallel to the madhab that, why did you do it only 100 times? Because when I did it 200 times, I didn't get the same experience, right? Or why do you do this 200 and how come you didn't do it 100? Again, a lot of it has to do with the experience, internalization, when I reach a point where I feel I have some type of meaning with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how I connected to him. And in terms of the specific names, I don't know Ghazāli talking about them in terms of the number of times you should do it and how you should repeat it. But he does talk about the names of Allah. He has a book very specifically called Asmā'ul Husna, right? The beautiful names of Allah. And he talks about the meanings there. So all of these are to bring taqwa. Doing all of these actions are to bring taqwa, is to bring awareness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and which is why Ghazāli, again, why he prescribes it, why he talks about it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Hot button topic. So dhikr, oftentimes depending on the community you're in, using sibha or something like that, it's okay, the sun is to use your fingers. Does it matter?
What is the sibha? What is the tasbih?
Counter.
It's a counter, right? It's a logistic tool. That's all. It's like telling me don't use a clock to keep track of my prayers.
Calculations.
Right, or using calculations and things like that. I mean, the thing is show me one hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says Salatul Asr comes in at 3:23. If you have logistic tools that will help you in your prayers, they'll help you in your adhkar. Books are a tool themselves. Yes or no?
Sure. Yeah.
Right? They're tools to help us remember things or to reference things.
Good point.
Okay, all of these are tools. And if you're going to remove one tool, you might as well remove them all, unless you have something the Prophet ﷺ specifically prohibited. He said, don't pray like this, or don't do it like this, or don't remember like this. That's where it becomes an issue, and that's where it becomes a problem. I think one of the most harshest opponents to the Sibha is probably Ibn Taymiyyah, and even he said a person shouldn't do it out of why? You guys know? Out of riyah. He said out of showing off. That's it. And the thing is, I can visualize that, and I can see that. I've seen people like they're in conversation, and you just see them. You know what I mean? I can kind of see that in certain situations. I'm not here to talk about anybody's intention, but like you're engaged in full conversation, and you're still doing dhikr, huh?
Ghazāli said the hatch only. So maybe they.
I'm not here to talk about anyone. Yeah.
Clearly, they were not moved by the conversation, and they did not want to.
The conversation wasn't interesting. Allah protect us. Allah protect us. So that's where that falls into. You know, in terms of it being a bit, I think that's more of a modern Najdi take on it. I don't like classically. I don't know. Classically, I can't. I don't know any scholars who've talked about it.
I think they trace to some Sahaba still using it. I don't know if it's authentic or not.
Yeah. No, well, I've heard similar. Again, I don't know either. Like having a
Salama, Abu Huraira.
Okay.
There's a lot of.
Mumtaz.
And I'm biased. It's
Yeah.
prejudice.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, it's a logistic tool. Yeah, it's a logistic tool, just like all the other ones. I mean, it's the same thing as me after every prayer pulling out a dua book, right, and referring to particular dua. It's a tool. Like I'm using it the same way. The other problem that comes up with in the same similar discussion on what is bid'ah, and that requires a series in and of itself. Honestly, how do I define bid'ah? What is it? Where does it apply? But the reality is that there are certain situations and certain things that it can apply to, because if the Prophet ﷺ made a particular type of worship open-ended, you are not allowed to close it. Simple. It's as simple as that. If he put a limitation on something, then you have to follow the limitation. If he limited it, like he limited Dhuhr to 4 rakat, he limited Maghrib to 3, he limited Zakat to 2.5%, he limited Hajj to particular days, right? Those are limitations. Yeah, I can't be like, you know what, it's a little bit more convenient now. I don't think anybody's going to be on Arafah. I'm gonna go make Hajj, right? That's a bit that's a bid'ah. That's where I would apply. Or like, man, I think people need some more money. Let's bump the Zakat to 5%. It doesn't work like that. But when it comes to open-ended ibadat, when it comes to open-ended types of worship, especially like azkar and dua, okay, the sky's the limit. Sky's the limit. So the Sufi's path to purification, there are limits that a man can reach, right? There's only so far we can get by personal endeavor, regardless of how intellectual you are and how much you read and how much you study, and regardless of how many adhkar and how much remembrance you do and how much you try to engage, you have a limit. Get back that, it's a gift from Allah. And this is something, again, I want to stress this time and time again. Just because we take these particular pathways, it does not mean that we will ever receive enlightenment. It's not a condition. And if an individual does receive it, then it is a gift. And that's something that's really important for all of us to take and keep in mind. Because the moment we change our mentality and think, I will receive kashf, I will receive this inspiration if I follow this way, I've already fooled myself and I've become arrogant. I've tricked myself. Because why? Because now I feel like I'm deserving.
It's transactional.
And it's transactional. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need me to do anything. He doesn't. I am in need of Allah. So how does this gift, how does this inspiration manifest? Ghazāli mentions a few things. He says sometimes it comes as a flash. He says sometimes it comes successively, one after another. He says sometimes there are different time frames. Sometimes it'll be for very short. Sometimes it'll come for a longer period of time. And he said the stages are limitless, honestly. And some people will receive more, some people will receive less. And again, all of this is based on the fact that it's a gift. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just because a person receives more, it does not mean that he is more righteous. Important note. Wallahi, we're in complete reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing we can do to make it come faster. There's nothing that we can do to receive more from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's gifts. He gives it liman yasha mata yasha kayf yasha. So there are a number of obstacles along the path. You will find that there are individuals, what happens is that when they take the path of the Sufi. When they follow the path of the Sufi, they'll have an ill disposition. They'll start becoming upset. They'll start becoming angry. They'll become confused. Some of these individuals will fall ill. So what does Ghazāli say about these people? It's actually really interesting.
They're weak, and
So
it's not meant for them.
He said they're not grounded in the sciences. So again, I'm saying Ghazāli, he's very Sharia based. He's very Sharia based. He said the reason that you're becoming like that is because you weren't doing it right in the first place. You didn't follow the guidelines that you were supposed to follow. If you had followed the guidelines, you wouldn't have had these problems. Because following these things should only what?
And better you.
They should only make you better. These things should only make you a better person. And if you're doing it and you're becoming meaner, you're becoming angrier, you're becoming stingier, you're becoming more frustrated, then that means you need to go back and study because you're not doing it right. So over here, he and this is really nice. Ghazāli says here, he says, many Sufis have traveled this way only to fool themselves for 20 years. Whereas if he had studied thoroughly beforehand, his confusion would have been made apparent immediately. Busying oneself in seeking knowledge is a surer and closer way of reaching that goal. Look, يؤكد دائما, right? He keeps going back and he keeps reinforcing this idea and the importance of knowledge when you're following these signposts and when you're following this. Ghazāli was a G, bro. Like,
That's crazy.
so where's here it is. So in some Sufis, they actually claim the opposite. They say that the person who follows the path of knowledge has not followed the prophetic way. Because the Prophet ﷺ did not actively seek knowledge. No, I'm serious. So what does he say about them? He says, وَمَنْ ظَنَّ ذَلِكَ, and whoever thinks that, فَقَدْ ظَلَمَ نَفْسُهُ, he's only oppressed himself. وَضِيَعَ عُمْرُهُ, and he wasted his life. بَلْ هُوَ كَمَنْ يَتْرُكْ طَرِيقَ الْكَسْبِ وَالْحِرَاثَ رَجَاءً لِلْعُثُورِ عَلَى كَنْزٍ مِنَ الْكُنُوزِ. It's as if this person, he left off trying to plant and trying to seek providence and trying to seek sustenance, and he only ended up leaving off treasures. But in ذَلِكَ مُمْكِنٌ, he said, and while possible, وَلَكِنَّهُ بَعِيدٌ جِدًّا فَكَذَلِكَ هَذَا, he said, but that's really far-fetched. He said that's extremely far-fetched. That it's possible that you'll come across a treasure without digging and without working for it. He said that's super far-fetched. He said, and similarly, trying to get the way and trying to become a true master without being grounded in the sciences, without being grounded in knowledge. وقالوا, and they said, لا بد أولا من تحصيل ما حصله العلماء. And he said, and they said that without doubt, you must seek knowledge. Similar to how the scholars sought knowledge. وَفَهِمَ مَا قَالُوهُ, and they understood what it is that was said to them. ثُمَّ لَا بَأْسْ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ بِالْإِنْتِظَارِ لِمَا لَمْ يَنْكَشِفْ لِسَائِرِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. And he said, then after that, go ahead and seek as you like, as what happened to the scholars that preceded you. فَعَسَاهُ يَنْكَشِفْ بِالْمُجَاهَدَةِ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ. And we hope that this individual, after working hard and striving in that path, that this inspiration comes to him. Jimmy, it's really nice. It's really nice. But I hope this clarifies a little bit concerning dhikr, adhkar, why there's creativity allowed in it. What is it that's intended by repetition of particular names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what it is an individual should actually be doing when he's doing those things. Because very superficially, even for myself, when I first saw it, I said, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't understand. Are they praising Allah? Right? But then when you realize, no, it's just a way to ponder Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name and to internalize and to remember his magnificence and his magnitude. And it made more sense to me after that. Actually, Ghazāli clarified it for me. Do you have any questions? This is it. This is the end of the chapter. That's quick. It's quick.
That was really challenging. Jam-packed.
Total, including the quizzes, under 45.
That's perfect. And it's time for
Let's do it. Are there any questions?
asking for any questions. Any questions? Are they allowed to talk or no?
I'm sorry?
They can't talk, huh?
I mean, just through your computer. No? guess I'd have to be quiet.
They want, let's see. Like for Vez, how does doing this type of dhikr in groups bring you closer to Allah?
So,
Group dhikr.
oh, good. So the question is about group dhikr. It would be, a parallel to this would be praying in congregation.
Shouldn't it be done alone?
So, again, going back, what actually happens in all of these situations is that when we talk about being alone, you have to be alone mentally. It's not about being necessarily being alone physically. So like for example, congregational prayer, like when we do Salatul Jama'ah, essentially who's praying?
Everyone.
I am, right? Like I am, as an individual, I'm praying. And it's the same thing with the group. It's the same thing with the group. And again, remember, there's a level of creativity to all of this. And it might not be your personal preference. You might even feel uncomfortable, which is fine.
Yeah.
It's not necessary to attend those gatherings. But I have trouble saying that there's a major problem or there's a major issue with it. So a lot of people use the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud, right? Where he came and he saw people like, doing adhkar and there's something. But the reality is we don't know what it was that he was making inkar of. Specifically. It doesn't come that, he said that, okay, this A, B, and C is what you were doing and this was problematic. So it's very problematic to even use that hadith as a proof. So using the group dhikr, I don't have an issue with it. I don't have a problem with it because, again, there's creative freedom within dhikr and dua.
And I also feel like there's a lot of ways that Allah can like give you like, I guess like a sense of connection. Like it doesn't have to be dhikr.
Yes.
Like
no, absolutely.
You can hear a verse from a rap, just facts. You can walk on the street, someone says something, some rap lyrics, and you like it reminds you of something. It has an effect on you.
No, you're absolutely
You know what
right.
I'm
No, because what is dua? Like, what I mean? Outside of prophetic dua, you can have very creative, supplications to Allah. And they can be very heart-moving, right? And they're things that you can really internalize. And it's the same thing with this. And not just that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he tells us to do tadabbur, when he tells us to ponder, there are two things that he actually commands us to ponder over. What are they? Huh?
Yeah.
Well, the Quran, like very specifically, and
Creation.
creation. Like, these are two things Allah very categorically tells us to do tadabbur. Huh?
Like in the world of science, that people
Yeah.
understand.
I mean, how do you bring someone to the realization that there's Allah? You'd be like, oh, there's a God. Really? How do I know? Well, because the Quran says so. Okay, I don't believe in the Quran. You know what I mean? It's that logic won't work. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, he says, oh, look at the world around you. Like how we made the sky without a canopy, without any kind of support. And in yourselves do you not see. Like, all of these are different things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to ponder over. So the thing is, if I'm pondering over Allah's verses from the Quran or his signs outside, these are different ways to ponder and remember him. If I stop and I look at a tree or I look at a leaf or I look, and I just think, how many times have any of us gone out for a walk and we just stop and we look around and we just realize Allah's magnificence? There's reward in that. There's different ways of doing it.
Like flying when you're like above the clouds. I'm not gonna lie, when I see the clouds, bro, ya Allah.
No, look,
Like,
it's
for real, man.
no, and different people have different experiences.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
But institutionalizing these practices is the problem.
Why?
Personally, that's when I think it's a real bid'ah. Because now because I've seen these people say, you either with us or against us. Then it becomes a problem. It becomes cultish.
No, so the thing is, partisanship I have a problem with.
Yeah.
But making, like, for example, the madhahib. Madhahib are institutionalizing fiqh, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with the institutionalization. The problem I have is like, oh, you're Hanbali. Huh?
That came from
Right?
my mind.
That's the problem. But if you're like, you're Qadiri? No. Or Shadiri? No.
That's a good point.
That's the problem. The problem, like, because at the end of the day, what is the difference between the turuq? It's like they have different awrad, like they have different types of adhkar that they're supposed to do. they take bay'ah to a different sheikh. Like, it's not a very rigid institutional system like the madhahib.
What about the concept of bay'ah?
Oh, the bay'ah. The bay'ah. So the thing is, there's spiritual bay'ah and there's political bay'ah. So the thing is, like, spiritual bay'ah, okay, I promise I'm not going to even. Yeah. If that's what you need.
Bismillah.
No.
Can I give you a bit?
No. So the thing is, if you need to do that, because what is the purpose of all of these tariqas? Honestly, I think it's more of a social purpose than it is like a religious one. Yeah. So it's more of a social, like it's like a fraternity. It's to be part of a group of people who will accept you and help you and encourage you. Wallahu a'lam. That's what I feel. Now, are there elements of it that I don't care for? Yeah, absolutely. But like even with the madhahib, like are there parts of it like I'm like, what I mean? Like they don't sit well with me. So some people need that fraternity? I think so. I think some people need that brotherhood and they need those people to support them. And there's some people who are like, I'm not really interested. Like I'm uncomfortable with some of the practices. I'm uncomfortable with some of the things that they do. Whether you believe they're right or wrong, that's irrelevant. But I'm saying if you're not comfortable with it, wallahi, the tariq is salik, the way of the one seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's individual. You need to do what'll get you there. Allah. It seems more. I guess I oversimplify things.
So I'm still not grasping what they.
Oh, bay'ah is seeking, like pledging your allegiance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like with the Sufi tariqas, it's like a big thing. Like you pledge allegiance to like a particular sheikh, and why? Because he acts as your mentor. You need to seek his counsel every time you make a decision. It's basically like a glorified mentor.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah. Because he can make more active decisions in your life.
Alright, you know, shots.
This is the oversimplification.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
I mean, but the thing is, some people need that mentorship. They need that direct guidance. I mean, very honestly, some people need it. They need that guidance. Like, Sheikh, what do I do? He's just lost. He's unable to make those decisions on his own. The problem is the dependency that can sometimes develop. It's actually dangerous. The type of dependency that we can develop. But that's not the quote unquote sheikh's fault. That's the murid's fault. If he's encouraging it, that's different. But in general, it's again, the path is individual, and I think that's something that we all need to kind of grasp and come to terms with.
And similar like toxic connection that people have with people are not just limited to these chefs. Like we have toxic connections and relationship with just their friends.
Their friends, yeah.
Who they ask these questions. Hey, should I do that?
Yeah. No. So you have people who have that tendency to just have that dependency on others, right? They will constantly look for people to reinforce their ideas or people to kind of like let them, give them permission to act or permission to, to do certain things. So you have those personalities, you have those personality types. Now what happens is like when that person enters the tariqah, it just transfers over.
Yeah.
And the reality is a sheikh or a scholar or a teacher or anyone, I mean, he's a person. There's only so much he can do. The problem that comes in with a lot of these murids when they come into the tariqah, they're like, okay, the sheikh can do no harm, right? He can make no mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, who said? And this is the same problem you have with many quote unquote non-tariqah Sunnis, right? What do they do with their personalities?
That's not. That's true.
No, very honestly. What happens with their personalities when they hear about, Sheikh so-and-so, oh man, he married multiple times, this one got a girlfriend, this one did this, oh, this one went to a movie, this one. I'm being slightly facetious, right? Like, I'm being slightly facetious. Just distracting the conversation. Innovator. So yeah. So I'm saying. So the thing is, like, this happens. This happens even with Sunnis who don't follow tariqah. Like they do the same thing. They do the same thing, and why do they justify it? Because they're like, well, I'm not in the tariqah. That doesn't make it better, bro. Like, like you're still doing personality worship. You're still doing the same thing, and that's not okay, regardless of where you are and where you stand. But, Allah protect us. Allah protect us. Like I think it's again, the taqwa. It's an individual trip, man. It's an individual journey. Like why we feel we need to dictate our taqwa or our way to other people, this is a huge problem. It's a huge issue. But what I would like to do, and what I'm going to try to do for next class, inshallah, I want to share with you guys some sample awrad. So I'm going to try to reach out to the different tariqas, like of who I know. It's very limited, my reach.
Yeah.
Huh? I got some people. All right, alhamdulillah.
Bro,
No, the problem
you're
is
on camera.
no, you know.
on Facebook.
Yeah. So the thing is, no. What I would like to do is just so we can look at them and be like, okay, hey, listen, this is what they recommend. This is what they recommend. Now, can you make your own word? Yeah, absolutely. You know, and the thing, I have my own word. I have my own word. I mean, I'm sure you guys have your own awrad. And if you want to take from somebody else's word, that's a big deal. Like, I don't.
Yeah, unless your chef tell you can't. No.
Alhamdulillah, the mic is facing me, right?
No, they're gonna.
Everybody here? Allah Akbar.
Hey, they send me a photo so you
Allah
can see my feet.
Allah
They hear my voice though. Kind of muffled.
Voice is aura.
MashaAllah. Hey man.
It's too beautiful, I think.
Allah Akbar.
So like I said, this is just a very I try to spend a lot of time discussing and spending time on Dhikr because I think it's an important topic, and it just to help us understand, okay, where did this actually originate? Where did it come from? And is it problematic? And I hope I was able to give a clear picture of what it is and how it is, inshallah. And if we don't have any other questions.
No questions? Do we have?
They can hear you.
They can,
Right.
yeah.
They can hear you.
Oh, you're right. Facts. So you didn't respond when I said, oh, maybe on Facebook?
No, I checked it.
Okay. Someone said yes, I said type. Thank you very much.
Can you guys hear us?
You guys have any questions?
Can you guys hear us?
I just think that's very, very interesting. Yeah,
And I have problem with some of these groups where they go to the conclusion before seeking the knowledge. So I have a question: is that what is the difference between the knowledge, ilm, and ma'lumat? Just information. Because we have a lot of information, but we don't have knowledge necessarily. But people mistake information for knowledge.
I mean, so very, very basically, the difference between ma'lum and ilm is something that you can actually implement. It's something that you're not implementing in your life. It's not making any change. It's not doing anything for you. If it doesn't do anything for you, this is ma'lum.
Okay.
This is information. Ilm is things that you actually can implement in your life. Allah.
So people talking back and forth about like what kind of shampoo so and so.
No, I mean, so the thing is like,
Uh-uh.
the migration pattern of otters. I mean, like there's a lot of information that's out there. That
That's
you're
pretty
like-
random.
Yeah, no, it's like random.
That
I did look up. So
you use this twice.
yeah, I know. So like
He
there
really
is.
wants to talk about others.
Hey, let's do it, bro.
Yeah, so-
Come on, man.
next class. So the thing is like, you do have this random, but the thing is, the reality is, what can I do with that information? Like, how can I actively implement it in my life? And is that going to bring me closer to Allah?
Because I can say the same. We have a lot of. I can only practice so much.
No, absolutely. So, and which brings up a better question is like, okay, when I have a buffet of actions to choose from, what action should I do?
You're like Mario and go for like the big coins, you know what I mean?
So how do I decide which ones are the big coins?
Which ones that specifically specify in terms of
Maybe.
like certain acts that are done. We do prayer in congregation as opposed.
I mean, like fara'id.
Listen, when we talk about these things, fara'id and sunan, these are understood. These are the first. Ghazāli already talked about them,
Depends on the person. Then.
right?
What they choose.
Depends on the person. All of these things are individual. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Kullu muyassir lima khuliqa lahu." That a person will do what he's created for, or it'll be easy for him to do what he's created for.
Like that.
The Prophet ﷺ also said, "Ahabbul a'mali ila Allah," the most beloved actions to Allah أدوم, the ones that are most continuous. وإن خل, right? And that's at the end. People are right. They try using that first, right? Even if it's small. So how do I decide those things? I need to, first of all, I need to do tajriba. I need to try different things. I need to try different actions. And when I try those different actions, I will find the ones that my heart leans toward more. Maybe I enjoy reading Quran. Maybe I enjoy teaching. Maybe I enjoy studying. Maybe I enjoy doing Umrah. Maybe I enjoy praying. Maybe I enjoy fasting. I need to figure out what it is that I'm good at. I might be socially, I want to contribute and I want to do those things. It really depends. Like the individual needs to find it. Remember, I want to reinforce this concept too. The tariq of the salik, the way of the salik, of the seeker, is individual. And he needs to determine what is the best way for him to reach. You have this buffet of needs, you choose the one. It's like going to any buffet. Like, you try a little bit of everything, but eventually what's going to happen?
Choose the one
You're going to choose the meal that you enjoy. And is it going to be the same as the person next to you?
Not really.
No.
Okay, wait. So maybe to counter that, like if you think about like a patient and a doctor, right? I could say I'm feeling ill. I could go to a doctor, but like I'm just gonna like wing it until I'll try different pills until I'm
that's fine.
Feeling better.
I understand what you're saying. So this would be okay. This is for the argument that I need to share. Right? Because
it doesn't necessarily mean bad, but this idea that even the Sahaba had the Prophet none of them traversed the path alone.
Yeah.
They didn't make independent decisions.
But they did. Because all of them chose different actions that they enjoyed. Not all of them were statesmen. Not all of them were warriors. Not all of them prayed a lot. Not all of them read a lot of Quran.
All of them were like.
Not all of them were scholars.
Yeah, exactly.
Did the Prophet said, okay, this is your personality, you needed to be like this?
No, but that's different though. That's not what I'm. Whatever your occupation is though, you still have to go to the doctor. Like your ailment is.
I agree.
The prescription has to come from somewhere.
I agree. So where would I go for my prescription?
I don't know.
What are the scholars at?
Okay.
Simple. Or
so this is the same. So
it's the same thing.
So we're not necessarily saying like you need a sheikh regardless, but this like we're not saying it's as specific as this person that's like specializing in this tariqa or something like that. But the idea that there are people that know these things, like you don't just like willy-nilly like I'm just gonna like let me try Dhikr and then I'm gonna try this and then I'm gonna try that, and like you should ask.
I mean you can, but at the end, like, so the thing is there's individual taste and there are people who need guidance, right? There are a number of people who learn from books and there are people who learn from shuyukh. You have all different types of people. It's not necessary that one is wrong or one is right. Like I told you, I'm not anti-tariqa.
No, I'm asking. I'm just
so the thing is what you're talking about. There's a difference between personal exploration and seeking a cure for my ailment. Does that make sense? My personal exploration, no one can tell me who I am. That's only that self-discovery is my own. Seeking an ailment for my problem, that's where I would say no. You need to go to either a scholar or a master. Right? I have no problem going to the Sufi master, but I would go to him on a personal level. I would go to him if I have an ailment and I just can't figure out how to cure that ailment.
Like I'm really struggling with arrogance. I've tried reading the Quran. I've tried doing Dhikr. I've tried doing all these things. I can't seem to get this out of my heart. Let me go ask. Okay.
But over here you're seeking. You have an ailment, and you want, and it's more specific.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Versus personal exploration, where you're just trying to, hey, what deeds do I like?
Okay.
You can go to the sheikh or you can go to the master. What is he gonna? The most that they're gonna do for you is what? Have you tried this? Well, have you tried that?
Yeah.
Well, I think you should try this, or I think you should try that. Is it necessary that they're even right?
No, not necessarily.
So, does that help?
No, good. That's what I was thinking.
I wonder how I think the people talked about Bilal al-Rahman and the Prophet talked about this just being ahead of his.
Yeah.
I wanted to listen to this tie into that. I feel like it seemed like a combination of utilizing what he received as far as rulings from the Prophet, but taking it creatively in his own way.
Awesome.
see what I'm saying?
No, that's a beautiful example.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful example. The example of Bilal radiallahu anhu, where the Prophet ﷺ told him about extra actions and extra deeds. So what did he do? He's like, well, every time I make wudu, I'm going to pray 2 rakah. Did the Prophet ﷺ tell him to do that? He didn't prescribe it in any way, shape, or form. In the supererogatory acts, there's a lot of creativity that you have. But can you imagine him making 2 rakah, like doing sajda first and then doing ruku second? No. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, he said very categorically, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. He said, pray as you've seen me pray. And don't break the system. You want to pray, you pray as much as you want, you pray whenever you want, you pray for whatever situation you have, but it has to be within the structure. He didn't provide the same structure for dhikr or dua. It just has to be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's it.
So I have another question that relates to that, right? So when you try different things, sometimes while you're exploring, then time, just finishes. So how do I know that this thing is for me, and how can I stay consistent?
Okay, consistency is a gift from Allah, and it means that you've been given tawfiq. It means that you've been blessed.
Nice, okay.
Right? The other thing is the time that's passed, none of it was wasted. Right? In the exploration, you're receiving reward. So, because you're getting multiple rewards. Number one, you're doing good deeds. Secondly, you're doing mujahid. Right? You're actually struggling, you're actually striving to find a way to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does that help?
For sure.
Right? And I mean, how do you, not just that, like, there's certain actions that give you joy. And is it necessary that same action will give you joy for like 30, 40 years?
No, really.
Yes and no, right? Yes and no, because we change as people, and our look changes, our taste changes. So maybe after 10 years, you'll be like, oh, man, like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, I've been fasting for long. I want to try something else. I'm gonna spend more time reading Quran. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna spend more time doing this. Yeah, I mean, like you'll change. You like people change.
Sure.
So just because like, oh, alhamdulillah, I got a system down. And then all of a sudden you feel like you're dropping off. That means it's time to change the system. You've gotten your word. All right. Any other questions? You guys have to write them down. It's getting late now. I can go all night. I have no problem, but I think the recordings can only go so long. طيب and nobody had any other questions. طيب خلاص يعني والله أعلم وصلى الله على خير خلق نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.
Still online, still Facebook Live.